Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer!
Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it!
And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal are in front.
Arsenal are embarrassed at Leicester, and Ramsey's Arsenal career is over. But here's the good news. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. There is no good news. That's the good news. There is no good news. Having said that, though, look, I have to apologize. We are late putting this podcast out, which is kind of on brand, but the truth is I traveled a lot in April for, it says here, my job. Yeah, we'll have to do something about that. Won't happen again, I promise you. And we will have podcasts out in a timely fashion. I think Scott and I are planning on doing a pre-match podcast for the Valencia game as we bravely soldier on in this thing called Arsenal Fandom. There will be new Patreon content coming out, like lots of it. A top four pod. I'll explain what that is. Maybe kind of a misnomer when it comes to Arsenal because top four maybe has slipped away, but it's a different kind of top four pod. Mailbag pod, squad building pod, all kinds of stuff coming on over there. FBAs are coming around, and I want to thank everyone who voted for that. But enough about us. Let's talk about who is on the podcast. Scott is here. You can find him on Twitter at _that_crab. Hello, Scott.
Yeah!
And Dave, Scottish Dave from the erstwhile Arse to Mouse podcast is here. You can find him on Twitter at McMeeks. Hey, Meeks.
Hello.
Hello, indeed.
Okay, the new, etc.
Yeah, you and I met IRL.
Yes, but there was no kissing involved, which was quite disappointing. So,
but there was
maybe
like a lot
next
of
time.
innuendo and a lot of telling each other that we were good-looking men and things like that.
Heavy petting as well, from what I can drunkenly recall. So,
I mean, we did have a drink at a bar where there were a lot of genitals on display. So
that is true. Yeah, pickled genitals in jars. That was quite the thing.
yeah, now I'm gonna have the FBI at my house, but that's fine. Won't be the first time. So I said Dave is on Twitter at McMeeks. When I say he's on Twitter, I mean that in the loosest sense. When was your last tweet? Like 8 months ago?
I think I retweeted something on the 15th of January, and that's only because I've just looked back now. So
if you're the person Dave retweeted, it must have been a hell of a good tweet. Okay, look, enough foreplay. We just got to dive into it. Scott, Emery in,
That's
Emery
me.
out. What do you think?
Oh, man. Can I be like Emery undecided?
Well, let me ask you this. At the beginning of the season, I think we would have said that finishing top four was a really good achievement, and winning the Europa League would have been seen as well as a really good achievement. So I guess the question is, how fair is it to judge Emery on the fact that we have sort of collapsed in the last 5 Premier League games as opposed to the fact that we were in position to finish top four at all? And how much of that should be measured against the fact that, look, this is kind of, I believe Tim on our back channel called it a bald man searching for a comb competition for top four here. So, I mean, does Emery deserve credit for having us in position in a season that we all kind of thought would be a transition? Or does he deserve criticism for having gotten in that position, kind of shitting the bed down the road?
Yeah, so I did say I was undecided, but I do have a couple thoughts. So overall, you look at things, and Arsenal are about where you'd expect them to be. By the stats, they've always kind of been that 5th, 6th best team, and that's exactly where they are on the table. That Europa League semifinal is about probably the minimum expectations for Arsenal in this competition. I guess you could say that Arsenal were in pole position to get into the top four, but, the stats were all, flattering for them. They were definitely not the 4th best team, competing to be the 3rd best team. So we are exactly where we expected to be about at the start of the season. We're exactly where the stats say we should be. So, I mean, I guess this is a massive failure, but it hasn't been a resounding success. I guess it really depends on what, the management thought the expectations for the season were on how to proceed.
Yeah, and I guess it is, I think, look, once you're in a position like we were in 5 games ago, you can't look at what we've done since then and not be heavily influenced by it. I mean, you could say, well, what if the results were reversed? What if we had the end of our season at the beginning and we had that long winning run at the end? Yeah, I mean, we may have a totally different outlook and say, wow, Emery came in and there was a lot of change and there was a lot of things he had to get his hands around, but once he got his hands around it, look what he did. He got us on a winning run. But that's not what happened. He came in, we kind of lucked our way a little bit to a winning run. I'm not trying to be dismissive. I mean, there were some performances there that weren't as good as the result, but we did go on a winning run. But having established himself with the team and gotten that under his belt, he hasn't really been able to establish a philosophy, build an approach. And some of that's down to injuries, but some of that I think is down to shortcomings. Dave, I guess, you have been in our Do Me WhatsApp back channel with Tim, the pro Emery voice in that back channel. You've had a lot of patience for him. I think some of that is wearing thin. I guess what I would say for you is put the results aside for a minute, because it can't only be about results. Do you think a big problem for Emery in winning over a section of the fan base is just that there is no clear identity of what his football is? So we can't say this is what he's trying to do, and he needs this kind of player, or he just needs a little more time. I struggle to connect to the guy, first of all, because I just don't think he has a ton of charisma, which is difficult in the second language, but also because I don't feel that I know what his philosophy is, and I don't feel that I can identify with it. Is it the type of football he's installed that makes him harder to feel a connection to?
I'm going to come right out of the gates and say, after the unerring shit show of Sunday, I'm no longer in any way going to even contemplate fencing. So I'm just going to go straight in and say, Emery out, Emery fucking out. He's
I knew inviting you was dangerous.
On his best day, he's maybe a 7 out of 10 coach. On his worst day, he's far less than that. I think you've got to take the context of, yes, expectations were maybe different at the beginning of the season. Transitional period. We look at United post-Ferguson. But you've really got to take the context of what the other teams around us are doing. You know that kind of general thing that happens every year between, I'd say, 6th and 8th, where every team's just trying to avoid Europa League. The Europa League positions, they're purposely eating poison lasagna and etc. etc. Now it's like every team between 4th and 6th, no one wants to get in the Champions League. I mean, it's an historically awful United side who've won in the last 5 league games. It's under the Abramovich era. It's an historically bad Chelsea side. They've won 2 games at their last 5. So
Spurs too, by the way, they've tried to shit the bed as well.
Spurs have they've not been great recently. So yeah, we're all just that horrible pack of drunks fighting over the last cab on a Saturday night, well, covered in kebab meat. I think generally, you look at most of the metrics this season. Now I know we've already accrued more points this season than we did last with 2 games. So I think we got 63 points last season, and I think we're now in 66. I guess we could finish on 72 if my Sesame Street maths hold out, but
I was told there'd be no math.
We will not win at Burnley, so there's a in no way a spoiler for you. We've scored less goals than last season. I think we scored 74 last season. We're on 69 now. Sure, if we put a few past Brighton, that might change. I think we're on course to concede more goals. I think we're only 2 behind how many we conceded.
Yeah, that part's astonishing, frankly.
We have somehow scratched out more away points, so though considering we only got 16 last season, that's not particularly encouraging. I think our top assist maker is 8 goals, Lacazette, which was I think the same as Ramsey and Ozil had last season. I looked at the stats. Ozil's got 2 assists this season. I know he's had bruised feet every single week of the season, but Jesus Christ. But going back to your point, I think there's no identity. There can't be identity because there's no cohesion in the tactics, or I think even more pertinently, there's no cohesion in the starting lineups. We're so, he's so schizophrenic in his lineups, and from going between, I'd say, Palace on 2 weeks ago when he was maybe overly cautious to then maybe being overly gun-ho at Molineux. There's just no consistency in what he wants to do with his selection or his tactics. And I think that translates to what we saw on Sunday against Leicester. A group of timid, confused players who are seemingly too thick or too gutless or too heartless, or a combination of all 3 to carry out what he wants to be carried out the pitch. So yeah, Emery out. Emery out. Emery all the way out.
I appreciate your circumspection in your answer there. I mean, look, it is one of those tough things, right? Like, look at the season where we finished 2nd behind Leicester. There are some people who are like, oh, don't you see the improvement we're making? We finished 2nd. And then there were other people who I think rightfully were like, no, we were level with Leicester in February and we fucking lost the title to Leicester City. all the other teams fell away, we should have taken advantage of that. And I think given the position we were in the league, whether you feel that we didn't have the right to expect to be there or not, what we've done subsequently is really damning and really worrying. I will give Emery this. I think that he has had some extraordinarily difficult circumstances behind the scenes and with the player personnel. Gazidis going, Sven going, the turnover in the back room, that kind of dysfunction can be a distraction. The Ramsey situation has been tough. We don't know what happened behind the scenes there, but he was in the team, he was out of the team, and then the injury. He had to sort out the Mesut Ozil situation, which, whether he got it right or wrong, was a disruption. He lost Holding for the season. He lost Welbeck for the season. He lost Bellerin for the season. Again, all major issues. He got no reinforcement in January other than, it says here, Denis Swear. I don't know. Some guy from Barcelona. I'm not convinced he exists. So, there have been a lot of challenges along the way. Well, let's get a little bit focused on the game itself for a minute, Scott. And I think, to Dave's point, it has started to look to me like the players don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And that was never more evident for me than at Leicester. Now, I have seen the first 35 minutes before the red card described as a counter-attacking performance. I do not accept that. Because if you look at the counter-attacking performance at Spurs, for example, at Wembley, where we played so well, we pressed them aggressively. We were compact in the middle of the pitch. We pressed aggressively in their half. We didn't let them pass their way out. They really struggled to get by us. And we committed to that very aggressive pressing strategy and countered and played on the transition. If you look at Leicester, a counterattacking performance to me has to have one of two things or two of two things. It has to have real compactness defensively so that the other team isn't creating chances. And then it has to have the ability to win the ball and transition quickly. Now, we had a couple of decent transitions, but by the time the red card rolled around, they had 8 shots on target, or 8 shots, 2 big chances. They were carving us open. I don't think when a team is carving you open and you have 25% possession, you can say that was a masterful counterattacking performance. So just before the red card, let's look at that. He comes with this 4-4-2. It's not really a setup we've seen very often. I thought the players looked like they weren't sure what they were supposed to be doing. And even if the approach is to counterattack, 25% possession for Arsenal away to a mid-table team, to me, is not how we need to be playing football. So is that fair, or do you think the tactics were right and the execution was wrong?
You can make a good argument that counterattacking in that situation probably isn't a bad tactic to do, but it looked a lot more like a really bad bottom half table comes to the Emirates kind of performance. We've seen this kind of thing so often where they kind of come in and just give up the midfield. They're going to sit in their defensive third and kind of look to play direct and try to, gift something on the counter. And that really is kind of what Arsenal did in this match. They didn't press forward. They didn't even press in the midfield. Leicester came in and, they had 3 midfielders plus Maddison coming in. So there was basically a 4-on-2 in a lot of situations, and there was always an open man to pass to. And it was just so easy for them to be able to cut through the midfield and then really have a chance to do something into the final third. Yeah, I had him at 1.6 XG in that opening 35 minutes before.
So before we went down a minute. So again, if you're going to call something counterattacking, to me, Scott, a counterattacking performance means you shut up shop at the back and you play to hit the other team who's committing resources forward. 1.6 XG tells me you failed at that.
Yeah, very much so. So this was definitely not getting the first part of the counterattacking job requirements done. One of the things you're supposed to do is neutralize the other team and then, try to take your chances. And Arsenal did have one really good chance. Was
that the Iwobi chance?
The Iwobi one. And that, that was actually a really nice move that Arsenal were able to do. But, it was a 1.6, 2.6. So they were definitely getting outplayed in that opening 35 minutes. So yes, it kind of worked at times on offense, but on the defensive side, it definitely did not work because there was no pressure in the midfield and Leicester just outnumbered us in the middle of the pitch and totally were able to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, to me, if the plan was to counterattack, I don't feel that the players knew how to play that way. And to me, again, I don't think these are very good players. I think there's a lot of mediocrity in this team. But I do think you have to look at it and say, you're playing a back 5 at home to to Palace expecting your front three to basically do all the heavy lifting in attack. You go away to Wolves at Molineux, and you play a really attacking lineup, and you try to have possession. And that
really plays into what Wolves want people to do against them.
Yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense. I thought he got those lineups and tactics reversed. And then the other thing is Emery's own comments had me scratching my head, because he said after this Leicester game, we wanted to have control, and we felt that we were good on the ball before the red card, and that changed everything. But we had like 20% of the ball. So I don't even really know what the idea here was. But the players look really confused. Speaking of the players, I mean, one of the things that I think has become a clear issue for us, Dave, is that we, just from a defensive personnel issue, we're really struggling. This is where I have some sympathy for Emery, is that he can't put out a back line that he can trust to defend without reinforcement, without help. And, Mustafi got lucky that this game went so poorly and we went down to 10 men and the game just kind of disintegrated, because it obscured what I thought was another calamitous first half hour for him of playing people on side and generally being bewildered as to where he was supposed to be. I mean, I don't really have any words left for describing Mustafi or what we do with Mustafi, but is it possible to craft a coherent defensive strategy when you have someone like that who's going to undermine whatever the tactic is?
No, I mean, it's the football equivalent of having smallpox at the centre of your defence. I mean, I think my general strategy with Mustafi for the last 7 or 8 months is just to fire him into the surface of the sun and just, write off the 3 or 4 million you might get from him in the
Could you get like SpaceX to do that? I mean, is like how much do you think you'd have to charge SpaceX to like fire Mustafi into the sun? Like, surely.
Hey, I mean, I'm willing to take the 30 million quid hit. If we have to pay them 35 million just to fire him to the surface of the sun, I'm down for that. But
you could like get streaming rights for it and make some money back. Be a good commercial endeavor.
I don't think I certainly didn't appreciate how, and it didn't really feel like that at the time. But back in that 2-0 against United at Old Trafford, when Holding got injured, that I'm only really now appreciating what a kind of key loss that was for us, because I think Holding right then was probably in his best run of form of the season. Now, I think if you'd been able to deploy Holding and Socrates for like a good run of games in this really vital run-in, I think that would have had a fairly substantial effect on results. I think we wouldn't be looking at disaster class, as our blog coined it, for Mustafi against Palace. So, and I think if you combine the Bellerin loss with that as well, I've got a degree of sympathy with Mavropanos, because I think clearly he just does need a loan away somewhere. But Mustafi's arguably the worst centre half I've ever seen. I think, certainly I've ever seen Arsenal sign. Week in, week out, he's putting in performances that are on par with that horror show that Sylvester put in at the Nou Camp about 5 or 6 years ago, where Messi just seemed to score 16 goals against them.
Yeah, except this isn't Messi making him look bad. This is the dross of mid-table Premier League teams.
Again, Andrew, I think, had this comparison on Arsblog this week, just saying, this wasn't Brighton and Hove Albion going to Nou Camp. I've never seen us so overawed, perhaps maybe since the 8-2 at Old Trafford. I mean, it was shameful. I remember getting played off the park in that 4-0 at the Nou Camp, I don't know what it was, 6-7 years ago. But, that's Barcelona. This was Leicester, mid-table. Admittedly, they were in somewhat an upward surge since Rodgers came in, 8-10 weeks ago. But to put in such a craven, I think Emery's quotes of the last week have been particularly tone deaf. I know you touched on English isn't his first language. We do have to cut him some slack in that regard. But last week he was talking about, I need time and patience to make us the biggest club in the world, which is an astonishing statement to make when you're not even the best club in North London.
Honestly, that sounds like someone at Arsenal put that line in front of him and said, say this, because it reminds me of when, who was it just recently said? Or wasn't it just Josh Kroenke saying something like, or around the Super Bowl, we're going to win the Champions League in a few years or whatever?
It's kind of the same sort of vein as Cassidy saying, we could do things that could really excite you, and then being the only club in the top 5 divisions in Europe that didn't sign an outfield player that summer. But,
being furious is a type of excitement.
Yeah, but I think the most annoyed I've been with any quotes this season were those ridiculous quotes, using the sending the off as an excuse. Like the first 20 minutes of the game, we had something in the first 21 minutes, I think we had 20 completed passes. It's the most craven, embarrassing small-time mentality performance I've seen from Arsenal since the 8-2. It was absolutely atrocious. And whatever, you can say Emery's got a natural tendency for being conservative in certain fixtures, especially away from home, but it was just a staggering, we're just waving the white flag immediately. It was absolutely sickening. It was a disgusting performance.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to come from the tactics. I'm done with Emery. I'm done. So.
I think that we're going to get some pushback on your comments there. But I mean, look, this was a game where they had 24 shots to our 6. They had 12 on target to our 1. They had 7 big chances to our 1. They completed 515 passes to our 188. This was a thorough destruction. Unless you think, good use of lest there, that was just because we went down to 10 men. And I think wrongly down to 10 men, it should be said. And we were still in the game at that point. We were still being dominated at that point. Now, I do not deny that the red card had a major influence on what happened after that, but I still don't think you can excuse what happened before that. And, I look at it, and you look at the players he has on the pitch. I mean, Granit Xhaka completed 27 passes. He has 65% passing on the day. Xhaka is a guy who sprays the ball to the wings and recycles possession and, generally, is a pretty safe guy to build play from the back. But he's not a guy to me for the sit deep and counterattack strategy. So I just think the personnel wasn't right for it. But if I'm going to give Emery some credit, and Scott, this is where I think we have to talk about circumstance, okay? The circumstances of Emery's hiring were this generational manager leaves, and the guy who had all the centralized power. And Gazidis is, creating this insurgency where he's going to be at the top and Raul's going to be under him and Sven's going to be just under him and Emery's going to be at the bottom, man, running the day-to-day, football stuff, and then Sven and Raul are going to combine on finding the talent, and Ivan's going to rubber stamp all of it, and it's going to be great. And that blew up almost instantly. And so he came into a situation where there was immediate tumultuousness at the club. But on the pitch, he also had the problem that he had new players to integrate, which can be good but also difficult. He had injuries to cope with, all the things we've covered. But I think, let's use an analogy. Let's say you are having a heart attack, which, if you've ever watched Arsenal, is probably a pretty apt analogy. And you call for an ambulance. The ambulance comes, and the people in the ambulance who help you, we call them here in the United States EMTs. I don't know what they call them on the other side of the pond or around the world, but emergency medical technicians. They're the people that do the immediate job of keeping you alive till you get to the hospital. Let's say you need heart surgery. The EMTs may have done a brilliant job keeping you alive. You don't have them do the heart surgery. Once you get to the hospital, you go to a cardiologist, you go to a cardiac surgeon, whatever, and they do the heart surgery. Now, this may seem like a really bizarre analogy, and it is, because I don't always make a lot of sense. But let me get there. Emery was hired to be that EMT, right? To take the patient, to take the club from Arsene, from that period, and ferry it safely to a period where maybe it's back in the CL, maybe we're back on stable footing, we've moved away from Arsene, and presumably I think then another manager comes in to take us to the level where we could potentially compete for a Premier League title, compete in the Champions League, God forbid, things like that. I think Emery has done an okay job this season trying to do what he was tasked to do, which is stabilize things, ferry us through this season, keeping us relevant in the top 4 chase, keeping us in the Europa League, and hopefully getting us back into the CL, which still could happen. It still raises the question, whether we get in or not, was he the guy to then do the next job? And I don't know that he was ever meant to be the guy to do the next job. So, Scott, would you say that he has kind of done what he was brought to do, which is ferry us to the other side of this transition, and now, if we're in the CL and we're rebuilding, that next guy needs to come in, or if we're not in the CL, it is what it is. I guess, is that a fair way to look at Emery, that his job was to ferry us through this tumultuous period of change with the most stability that was humanly possible, and he's kind of done that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he, like I said, he's basically met the expectations that were kind of laid out at the beginning of the season. It hasn't always been pretty, but, this team isn't well put together. It's got a lot of issues. He's going to be close. And it's probably maybe like a 40-50% chance right now that Arsenal get into the Champions League via, either top 4 or the Europa League. So there's still a decent chance that he gets that job done. I've always seen him as a bridge manager. He's going to, bridge Arsene Wenger to the next guy that's supposed to really kind of hopefully be able to give Arsenal a chance to actually compete for, really good things like a title, maybe getting into, actual trophies and those kinds of things. I think that that's also kind of been the idea that, we were going to have a technical director who really kind of sets the philosophy of the club, that they have an overarching view of where the club is going and what they're building towards. And I think that has been a major issue because Gazidis left, Sven left, there was the power struggle. And now the big question, and the one that is more concerning to me more than what, if Emery sticks around or not, is who is actually leading the club and what is the vision and how are we going to get to that next place? Because it really seems that is a big open question. Is it going to be Raul? Is there going to be a new technical director that comes in here and really kind of...
There better be.
So, the summer... Because right now, Arsenal have a big rebuilding job that's going to be done. If it's perfect, maybe it's a 4 transfer window kind of rebuilding job, but more realistically, it's probably 5 or 6 windows to actually get the talent in here for the next great Arsenal team. So, you can only change so much in, one summer, you can even change even less in the winter. So it's definitely, you look at the team, there is a lot of aging players. There's a lot of players that probably no longer should be at the club that aren't at the right level. Andrew and James went through, and I think they were wanting to get rid of, or wouldn't be sad if 60 or 70% of
We're going to do
left.
that. We're going to do that.
And
that's going to be in the second half of the pod.
I pretty much agree with that. There's a lot of players that if they left,
don't ruin it.
I won't ruin it.
Okay.
I won't ruin it. Yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts in this, and given the expectations, I think Emery has been fine. I think his pragmatism with this team probably was right. I think you probably could have gotten better results with a different kind of coach, but I think, with his mandate to try to just get us in the Champions League, no matter what, his approach has been okay. I've definitely disagreed with it a lot at times. It hasn't been pretty. I think he's underperformed, at times, but he's also gotten some good luck. So I don't know how much to blame on the coach because a lot of bad things happened before he came. A lot of bad things have happened around him as he's been here, and this team just isn't very good. No,
and I think this is the problem, though. Look, when you have players that are mediocre, and there are a lot of deeply mediocre players, and there are a few, I think, pretty talented players in the squad, but a lot of deeply mediocre players, I think you have to give them a clear job, right? You have to say, Xhaka's good at this, and Iwobi's good at this, and, which we can debate what that is. I think you could say Lucas Torreira is good at this. Mesut Ozil is a supremely talented player if you let him do this. And then I think you have to build a system that tries to let those players go do those jobs that they're supremely talented at. If you look at the season Leicester won the title, that's not a great team. They had some great pieces. Riyad Mahrez, Jamie Vardy, maybe Drinkwater if you want to say that. N'Golo Kante, certainly. But beyond that, there's a lot of mediocrity there. And I think the best way to think about it is they had players that were great at doing certain things, they absolutely maximized getting them to do those things. Yeah, they sat deep and they countered. That was what they did. And they knew exactly how to do it. And by the end of the season, the players looked like they could do it in their sleep. That they could hit that out ball to Mars, that they could play that ball in, to Vardy running in behind, or the low cross into the box for Vardy to put away. I mean, they had that down to a science. I'm not saying that's all they did, but they really heavily relied on that. And I think the kind of the frequency of the changes of style, of strategy, of lineup, of approach with Emery has maybe not given certain players the ability to thrive because they just don't have that versatility in their game. I do want to touch on Stan Kroenke for a minute, Dave, because I like hearing your voice go up a register. I'm gonna make the case for the defense weekly because I don't think he's a good owner. But I will say this: every time we lose a game humiliatingly or go on a bad run, the narrative always seems to switch to Kroenke as the cancer, as the problem. But at the end of the day, the team we have should beat Crystal Palace at home. The team we have shouldn't lose 3-0 at Leicester. The team we have shouldn't lose 4 out of these last 5 games the way they have. Stan Kroenke is a problem for the future of the club and even the present of the club and the way this team is built and the way it may be built. Having said that, I feel like that excuse is used to exonerate players and coaches when results don't go well that should have gone better. Do you think that while Stan is a problem, do you think that discussing Stan in the context of something like a 3-0 loss to Leicester is just a way of distracting attention or changing the narrative? Because for me, whatever problem he is was not evident on that pitch in that day.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a kernel of truth to that. I mean, Stan Kroenke.
That's more kernels than I'm used to.
Stan Kroenke is not to blame for us conceding 9 goals in our last 3 league games. And you know, this might be the first time I've ever actually defended them, certainly out loud. I generally think up until the last January window that he's not stood in the way of Arsenal signing players. I don't think he's blocked signings. You know, like within 2 windows, we smashed our transfer record twice. You know, 55 in Lacazette and then 60 on Aubameyang. And you know, Alexis before that about 38 million. Ozzy Ozil was about 42, 45 million, something like that. So a lot of money has been spent. 35 million in Xhaka, 30 odd on Mustafi. The key thing is it's just not been spent well, and even worse than that, we've sold even worse. You know,
right? But we can agree, Stan is not the reason it wasn't spent well, right? Like,
no, exactly. I
pick your person there. It's not him though.
I don't blame Kroenke for signings or lack thereof. I think Arsenal, certainly from say the first 5 years or maybe 7 or 8 years after we first moved to the Emirates to the last, say, 5 seasons, we've spent a hell of a lot more money. So I don't really necessarily think the problems have been with Kroenke blocking money or, you know, not allowing Wenger or now Emery to spend until, you know, those kind of worrying internal communications during Christmas apparently where every department was saying we've got to slash budgets, we can only, and you know, we're not just talking about we can't make any permanent signings in.
You're talking about the short-term cost control.
Fucking canteen staff, you know, we've got to fucking cut down on how many fucking chips we're selling at lunchtime. I mean, it's just vaguely terrifying. But I think it's a good way to vent after a disappointing result, right? Because I don't think any of us rate KSE. I think, you know, that he's got a pretty unconvincing track record in American sports. I do not think there's very much sporting ambition at the club at all when it comes to the ownership. I think if you're talking about trying to bridge a 25 to 26 point gap between Liverpool and City, which we're currently in, I think you've got zero chance of doing it under Stan Kroenke. I think a truly ambitious ownership goes to a far more inspiring managerial appointment in the summer than Unai Emery. I think you go aggressively after like a Simeone and like as difficult it would be to prize a coach away from Juventus or Atletico Madrid. But yeah, I mean, I've got KSI KSI. Is it KSI?
KSI. I think KSI is a wrestler or something.
No, KSI is a really obnoxious YouTube personality.
Oh, okay, there you go.
KSI
well, at least we're both.
Yeah, I mean, Kroenke's not the reason why we've conceded
right, and
50 odd goals this season. Or
let me be
49,
clear,
so
Dave.
Just the 49 with 2 games left.
I'm not defending the guy. I think my attitude with him is he has no care in the world whatsoever about Arsenal being competitive.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As long as 2 conditions are met, the club doesn't lose money, and if there is a European Super League, Arsenal are in it. Like, I think those are the only things he cares about. Having said that, I haven't seen any evidence, and there may be some, I just haven't seen it, that at any point he has actively held the club back from doing something it wanted to do. Sure. I think he's putting money in? He's not. But I mean, no. And again, this may be a straw man, but I look at FSG over at Liverpool. They haven't put money in per se either. They've had some huge sales. They've funded things with, I think, football operations. I may be wrong about that, but I think for the most part that's what's happened. So it is possible to build a team that way. I don't like Stan, and I don't think he advances our ambitions. I just think that the discussion of Stan when we're in a run of bad form doesn't address why we're in that run of bad form. You know, when we beat Chelsea or when we beat United or when we have a good performance and draw Spurs or, you know, whatever the results are, no one says Stan was responsible for that. any more than he's responsible for these terrible losses. And so before we take a quick break, Scott, I think, I am ultimately very much on the fence with Emery in this respect. I think you can make an argument that he has done the par job right now. Is that fair to say that so far at this point of the season, if you just look at where we are in the Europa League and where we are in the Premier League, he's at about par for what you would have asked him to do? The problem for me is I don't know that I feel he's gotten there in a very effective way. Like, I think the reason I struggle to warm to him is I think the way he handled the Ozil situation, the way he handled the Ramsey situation, and the chopping and changing of strategies and lineups and halftime changes and constant turnover of how he's done that, the sort of questionable rotation earlier in the season around the Christmas period and the Europa League group stage, all of these things combined with some very conservative lineups against smaller teams away, our away record, the failure to improve the defense. Like, if I just look at our league position and our Europa situation, I'd say he's at par. But the things he's done to get there have me worried about who this guy is. And if you're going to go into a summer and say, we're going to give you a war chest, like $5 or whatever it is, €5, £5. I mean,
whoa, hey, big spender.
Well, I mean, that might be what it is.
Please.
Look, unless we can sell Ozil, in which case it's like £10. But the question becomes, do I have a philosophy with this manager that I say, yeah, I see what he wants to do, and we're going to give him the money so he can go do that? I mean, isn't that really the issue, Scott? It's that from a 30,000-foot view, you can't really complain with where we are right now based on where we thought we might be at the start of the season, but you can have some questions about how we got here.
Yeah, I think that's very true. So, you look through back at the rotation early in the season, he didn't really rotate much in the group stages of the Europa League, didn't give, any of the young players really a chance to kind of come through, because I think that there is, quite a bit of young attacking talent that actually would have been nice to get some minutes. I think, Eddie Nketiah. Let's just do that. Yep, there you go. Yeah, I think he's really, had a kind of an off year. I think it's kind of a lost year for his development. I think Saka, I think he had some flashes where I would have been nice to see him against some of these, weaker teams. Emil Smith-Rowe, before he went on loan, I think that he probably could have gotten some more minutes. I think these are all guys that, if we're going to need to cut players out for next summer, it would have been nice to have seen them get a little bit more early in the season, kind of rest some of our first team guys, get them ready. And then I think you also can look at his, way he handled the winter period. That was another issue. And I think that's something that a lot of people coming in from outside of the Premier League really struggle with. They don't really realize how brutal that stretch of the season is. I think that was probably a major issue. You talk about what is the philosophy? There really isn't one. Has there really been, major improvements that you can point to saying that, yeah, this is, we've had some struggles. There was learning curves. But, we're ready to actually go into next season with a platform to build on and improve on. I can't really say that there's been a major, confidence that that's going to happen for next season. So, yeah, the results have been fine. He's met the expectations. Do we have confidence that it's going to be better next year, or is it going to be more of the same? I think it's going to be more of the same. I don't think there's a huge thing. I think that right now that, if you told me he's got one more year left and it's going to be a lot more of the same pragmatic, and, really he's just trying to solidify us into a Champions League spot so then that we have another window to be able to have a little, extra $20-30 million to spend on players. Yeah, that'd be fine. I wouldn't like it, but that's fine. Get the next guy in after that. But I think you also told me, this was it at the end of the season. Okay, I'm not going to, cry over that and think that that's probably fine either way. I mean, I don't think he's been the major problem, but he has not helped things.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, we just had a manager for over 2 decades. And so I think we all think of that as the norm. That's not the norm. You hire a coach, he works out, you keep him. You're not sure he's doing the right thing, you get a new one. That's modern football. We've seen coaches win Champions Leagues, get sacked. We've seen coaches win. Ranieri won the league at fucking Leicester. That didn't earn him a lifetime appointment, and probably for the best. It may seem cruel and it may seem harsh, but either you think the guy is doing things the right way and moving things in the right direction, or you don't. And if you don't, that doesn't mean you hate him or he's terrible. I look at Emery and I say, This is a guy whose track record says maybe he has the right approach for a slightly smaller club with slightly lesser ambitions. Now you could say, hey, Elliot, guess what? We've become that club. Okay, touche. But, I don't know that PSG was a fit for him any more than I think Arsenal necessarily is. And I will admit, and maybe it's the language thing, I find him hard to warm to personally. We were very fortunate with Arsene Wenger in the respect that as a man, he was very easy to like and admire. His language skills were second to none, and he had a philosophy about life and football that was easy to admire, even when I was most frustrated with him. I never had any visceral distaste for the man. I think Emery is someone I have found it hard to warm to personally, and I fully admit that informs my feelings about him as a football coach. And we wanted someone more pragmatic. We wanted someone more flexible. I just think we kind of got all the way to the other end of that spectrum. I'm not saying he's bad. You can think this is so true of all of our debates about players, about coaches. You can think he's perfectly fine and still think that maybe he's not the right fit. And on that happy note, we're going to turn this podcast on its head and get upbeat and talk about Aaron Ramsey after the break. So that'll be really fun and happy because his Arsenal career is over. What we're going to do, we're going to talk Ramsey, we're going to sell some players, we're going to preview Valencia all in the next 20 minutes. But the first thing we have to do before we do any of that is sell you some lingerie. So we're going to take a break, hear about some sexy underpants, and come back after this. Stay with us. Okay, everyone, it's time to tell you about our friends at Enclosed Lingerie. You can find them online at The Enclosed, ENCLOSED.com. Enclosed Lingerie is a Lingerie of the Month club. That's right, just like a Beer of the Month club, only better, because it's a high-end luxury lingerie gift for you and your partner that's going to enhance the intimacy in your relationship. Right now, if you put in Arsenal at checkout, they're going to give you $35 off any gift from Enclosed Lingerie. So you're going to want to go to theenclosed.com and sign up now. What better way to celebrate the romance in your relationship than celebrating with a gift from The Enclosed? And the gifts keep coming every month. So while it can be difficult to remember to keep the romance, to keep the intimacy in your relationship, The Enclosed has your back. Every month you're going to get that high-end luxury lingerie gift, and it's going to remind you of the importance of romance in your relationship. So do it now. Go to theenclosed.com. There is a perfect fit guarantee, so you never have to worry about the fit. It's beautiful high-end luxury lingerie. Just go to theenclosed.com and enter promo code ARSENAL for $35 off at checkout. Do it now. Okay, we're back, and before we even go another step further, Dave, I just want to give you the chance to go into witness relocation or change your name or bring some new. I have a feeling you're going to catch some serious heat for the aggressiveness with which you've brought the takes on this podcast. I think you've taken the back channel and thought that was just an appropriate way to communicate in public. Do you want to soften anything? No. It turns out that people. Okay, awesome. Cool.
Emery all the way out.
Lean into it.
Doubling down. The funny thing is, right, like I tried to get Clive to do the pod, he wasn't available. I tried to get Tim, he wasn't available. I tried to get Paul, he wasn't available. So I have no buffer against what's happening here right now. And I just go whichever way the wind is pointing, as everybody knows. Let's talk Ramsey. His Arsenal career is over. This is pretty sad. And I was already sad that Ramsey was leaving. We already thought he was a good player. What sucks is it feels like the last 2 months, the only way any lineup has ever worked at all has been if Ramsey's in it. So this has long-ranging consequences for the club just because I think he's a hard player to replace, and he's a player with deep connections to the club over many years, and he's sort of the end of an era. But it has short-term, immediate ramifications for trying to win these next 2 Premier League games and win the Europa League. Dave, do you want to just quickly sort of eulogize Ramsey's career in a few sentences, and then maybe what it means for us just the last few games?
I think he has been one of the best servants of the last 15 years. Certainly, I think he's been one of the best servants at Arsenal Football Club post-Invincibles. I think he's a player for kind of the first few seasons of the Emirates that he was strangely polarizing. I think because he was always such a brave player. You know, he was never one to shirk responsibility. So because he was always so visible, because he took on so much responsibility when things didn't pan out and he gave the ball away. And I remember, when I used to have a season to get the Emirates, like he was always the first one that people jumped on the back of because he wasn't a buck passer. He really would take on the mantle of trying to make things happen. And you look at just statistically what he's done for us. I think he's our top scoring midfielder of all time now. He's got 2 cup final winners. I think he's probably been responsible for my 2 happiest ever Arsenal memories, certainly in the flesh. Being at that 3-2 Hull game and seeing him get the winner is probably the happiest footballing memory in my life. So if all he did with those 2 FA Cup final winners against Hull and against Chelsea, he'd still be probably one of my 10 favourite Arsenal players of all time. I think the really sad thing is we've seen how valuable he still is to this team. We're not eulogising a player who's past his prime or is a nostalgia act. He's, on his day, still one of the finest attacking midfielders in Europe. That's why Juventus are paying him, $400,000 a week to go there next season. So he's not some charity case who's riding in the sunset with best days behind him. Granted, the post Shawcross, he's never been quite the same player, only because he struggles to play 7 or 8 Premier League games in a row. He's always had persistent hamstring twangs and things of that nature. But in terms of, I can't think many examples where, especially in the modern era, we know how petulant footballers can be through either social media or through interviewers or through their agents. He has been a model professional. Like his ever since the pre-contract news came out from Juventus, he's been nothing but a consummate professional on the field. His attitude, his work rate has been second to none. I think it's been very telling. I think over the last 2 months prior to the injury against Napoli, I think he was head and shoulders, maybe with Leno, or he was certainly head and shoulders the best outfield player. And again, it's really sad that this Napoli, not only that it would have been lovely to see him get a deserved send off against Brighton at the Emirates at the weekend, and I'm sure he'll still be at the ground to say his goodbyes. But I think just in terms of short-term results and what we're expecting, what we are hoping to achieve between now and the end of the season, and I guess the knock-on effect of what sort of budgets that will give us for the off-season. You're talking perhaps £40 million to invest with Europa League football, or perhaps double that if we did qualify for the Champions League. I think we would have at least drawn against Palace 2 weeks ago if Ramsey being in the side. I'm not sure he'd have had the same impact against Wolves or Leicester. I'd certainly be more confident with this Valencia doubleheader in the side. So I think his loss for these next 2 European games and their final 2 matches could be the difference between 4th and 5th or 4th and 6th, or winning that Europa League. So I think short term it's very sad, and I think longer term it'll just be kind of sad that he doesn't get a bow out. And I think the sort of kind of romantic swan song I think his contribution to the football club deserves. So yeah, it's fucking sad for a variety of reasons, man. So
yeah, well, I mean, you've really lifted the pod there, so I appreciate you doing it.
Hey,
I will say this about
Ramsey. Cyanide capsules, it.
Yeah, that's kind of your brand. I think the first thing that we can agree on is that you can love Ramsey and think Ramsey is an incredible player and miss him terribly, and also think we were not wrong to not re-sign him. Look, we were wrong to not get money for him. That's pretty obvious. But I mean, for a player who can't stay fit, the kinds of wages we probably needed to offer were not really something we could afford to do, especially after having given Ozil what we gave him, which again, probably a bad decision. But once we made that decision, and with Ramsey's injury history, I don't think you can give him the wages he needed. I also think you have to sell him, but that's another issue. And even believing all that, you can still think it's terrible that he's going and see the impact. I mean, you look even at just this season. Pick your big game. 2-0 over Chelsea, 2-0 over United. The draw at Spurs that should have been a win if Oba hits, puts away the penalty. He scores the goal there.
Firstly against Napoli.
Yeah, exactly, against Napoli. He starts all those games. He often scores in the big games. When we went past City and Chelsea to win the FA Cup, he was dominant in a midfield 2 with Xhaka with a back 3 in both of those games. He's won us FA Cups with his goals. Big game player is usually a thing that people invoke that isn't real. It's just a thing that they imagine. But if Ozil is criticized for not being a big game player because you can think of big games where he hasn't shown up, the games you think of with Ramsey are big games. And we've really missed him, and we've really missed his character and his willingness to get on the ball and try to make things happen. And I think if you look at our midfield personnel right now, whether it's Torreira or Guendouzi or Xhaka, we have a lot of players that are not particularly progressive, that do not have the ability to go in and make the extra man in the attack. Ramsey's the one guy in midfield we have who does that and can provide the end product. And without him, we look very tame in attack. So, Scott, I mean, the absence of Ramsey for you, is it just that it gives us a real challenge creating balance between attack and defense, that we don't have that person in the middle of the pitch who can give us a little bit of both?
Yes, and I think that's actually been one of the things that's been so revelatory about him this season, especially as they've gone to the back three with, no real fullbacks and needing to use wingbacks, is that we've had to sacrifice a true attacking player. So we couldn't have had, the three attacking midfielders with a striker or, even, double strikers kind of a thing. So when he is in midfield, he still plays as a midfielder and will give good defensive actions, and he's not going to be a guy who will abandon his position. He can do that from time to time, but he will still put in his defensive shift. But he is also so good at getting forward and being in the right attacking positions that some of the other midfielders don't have. So we can play with more defenders, but still not sacrifice as much in defense. And I think that's one of the things that is so hard to replace about him. Is his ability to add shots on a team that really struggles, because that is not something that we get from our wide players. It's really just the strikers that are, guys that are actually going to get you more than, a single shot a game. So that was something that was so important about him in this role, especially from deep. So that's something that I think that you can definitely tell over the last three matches that Arsenal are significantly missing, is that we are trying to replace those. Plus his creativity, plus his shots, his ability to, be everywhere that he needs to be. It's just something that has absolutely killed the team, and it's going to be hard to replace going forward.
Yeah, and I think that looking at what Emery is trying to do, it seems like the problem is, again, the attack to me is more of a worry than the defense. We know why the defense is bad. The personnel isn't great. This isn't a great team defensively, but he can't seem to get the attack to click without Ramsey making the extra man.
Exactly. So when we play the back four, yes, we have the four true attacking players, but we have absolutely nothing at fullback. When we play the back three without Ramsey, then we are short a man attacking, and
we're attacking
the
with three.
Looks bad.
Yeah.
And it's so when he is there, it makes things work. It makes the numbers kind of pencil out. Even though we are giving up a man in attack, he is able to kind of do both. We talked a little bit about Leicester earlier. He is like the Kroenke, where Kroenke could be two men in, as a defensive midfielder, allowing them to be able to be more aggressive with their counterattack, because they knew that even if they turned the ball over, Kroenke was there to clean up. Ramsey is kind of that way for the Arsenal attack. We can have a little bit more, back to hold back, kind of give a little bit more solidity, but Ramsey is a guy that can get forward when needed and be in the right positions, but also recover and help out on defense.
Yeah, that's fair. It is a big concern for me, because right now what really seems to be missing is the balance in our attack, and I don't know how you get it there. And a big part of that too is because Iwobi and Mkhitaryan have been so weak. Real quick, Scott, on that point, I mean, those two players for me are the two that are carrying a lot of weight for our poor run of form, because Aubameyang and Lacazette I don't think have been brilliant, and our midfield is an issue. But I think if you could get something end product-wise or in the final third from Mkhitaryan or Iwobi, or certainly both of them, it adds a big difference, to what we're seeing right now. And because both of them have been so short of any final third contribution, I think we've been very easy to keep at bay. I mean, it's been said a million times, so we're not really covering any new ground here. So welcome to the Arsenal Vision podcast. Would you say that those positions have been the big disappointment?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think Mkhitaryan at times has had flashes where he's looked pretty good, but it's especially over the last few games, he has definitely just looked old. He's looked incredibly slow and unathletic. Not that he was a great athlete with Arsenal before, but I think it's gotten even worse, and that's something that is very hard or very easy for defenders to deal with from out wide. He's not a guy who's going to beat you, and then get past a guy and then just cause havoc in the box. And Arsenal are just absolutely missing a player that can do that. Iwobi is a good dribbler, not a great dribbler, but he's not the kind of guy that, probably, puts fear into fullbacks or, even if he gets matched up on a center back out wide, he's not a guy that, people are going to bring over other guys. That's not going to disrupt a defense and, be able to give a ton of openings for the other players. Arsenal are absolutely missing that type of player, and it hurts, especially when neither of those guys are going to give you extra shots and goals from out wide.
Look, the thing with Iwobi is, right, Iwobi is, and this is the most thundering cliche, and it's very much damning with faint praise, but he's an honest player. He's reasonably hard-working. He's just tremendously limited. For context, Iwobi has the same amount of league goals this season as Koscielny. He's got 3 goals. 3 goals and 4 assists, which are shocking numbers. I mean, shocking. For a wide attacker, when we're coming off peak season, or height of his powers, Alexis Sanchez, who was racking up double figures for both goals and assists every season.
20 and 12 or 25 and 13 or whatever he did.
For this drop in quality, where your Mkhitaryan and Iwobi have something like 10 goals between them for the season, and I think fewer than 10 assists between them. The lack of quality in wide areas is absolutely terrifying. I mean, that chance on Sunday at the King Power when he was bearing down and goal 1-on-1, I had roughly as much faith of him finishing that as I did. I mean, my level of faith was
can I stop you for 1 second?
Gervinho-esque.
Let me just stop you for 1 second to make a point about that. People overestimate how easy it is to score goals. Scoring goals is hard. I'm not saying he, quote, has to score from there, but he has to hit it with some confidence or conviction or power or direction.
Conviction's the word.
He leans back and he just abdicates responsibility. And I think, honestly, the only thought in his mind is put this vaguely on target so I can, not look bad. Maybe that's not fair, but he looked like he was scared of the chance, and we deserved nothing from that game, but he scores there. It is a totally different game, which is obvious and cliche. Again, you were doing it, now I'm doing it. But yeah, continue. But I was just making the point that it's not that he has to score there, it's that he has to show the conviction of someone who's been playing as an attacker for multiple seasons for Arsenal now.
I mean, it's clearly, I think you hit the nail on the head there. If we're going to continue with the firing the cliche gun, he is a player who looks, in his worst moments, bereft of confidence. I don't know what I mean. I think there's failings behind the scenes, I think, from a coaching perspective, because he looks like a rabbit in the headlights when he's going through and goal. There is no conviction there. As you said, I think he just wants to hit it vaguely on target so he doesn't look bad. I don't think he had any confidence in his own abilities on Sunday that he was going to score that goal. And when you look at the quality of wide attackers at Liverpool, and say, if that's the bar that we want to catch, I'm not saying it's fair to compare him to Salah, but to have such a cavernous drop between the best wide attackers in the league to what we are having to deal with every week, it's astonishing. I mean, that's one of the many reasons I'm told there's a fundamental sea change in personnel, which is probably going to require a lot more money than we're going to have at our disposal this summer, that we're going to continue to finish 25 to 30 points behind the league leaders. So,
Dave,
hooray! This was the optimistic half of the podcast.
Pick a player of the season.
Honestly, my end, this probably says a lot. My actual player of the season is Bernd Leno. I think Leno's really come his own since Christmas. I think he looks like the best signing of last summer. I
mean, and the funny thing is, we've conceded 49 goals, and he's probably been on this play. Scott, you got a player of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough because there really isn't a player of the season. I mean, there's been some good players, but there hasn't been a player that absolutely stands out. I think you can make an argument for Leno, you can make an argument for Aubameyang, you can make an argument for Lacazette, and you make an argument
for Ramsey, and he started 14 games.
Exactly, and it's bad. You think about your top goal scorer. Has he been great? No, he's been good, but he hasn't been amazing. You think about your guy that started the most of your games as your center forward. It's another guy. He's been good, but he hasn't been great. Leno, we're on track to concede more goals than last year, and our goalkeeper is our player of the season. He's been really good, but I mean, God, this is just all sorts of damning with faint praise. And just a quick point on the Iwobi one, like I totally agree. So like I'm pulling up the numbers. It's a 0.3 expected goals, and honestly, like you had to like adjust that down in your head, and it's like what is it, like a 10% chance, a 15% chance, like, and then you talk about where he puts it on target. That it gets scored about 20% of the time. So he takes a really good chance and probably makes it a little bit worse just based on, I'm just going to basically, not go for a corner, not really put it into where the keeper can't get it. I'm going to get it on target, and just, that's his confidence right now. And that says it all.
I don't love where it's headed. This whole thing feels like a train wreck, guys. I don't know how we're going to rescue this. So let's blatantly rip off the Arscast and see if that helps. Well, there's never an early here. We're already well past anybody listening. But let's blatantly rip off the Arscast before we quickly give predictions for Valencia. So I'm going to just say keep or sell. That's it.
All right.
You each are going to say keep or sell. I'm going to give you a name. You're going to say it. That's it. You don't have to explain. You don't have to justify. And my criteria is this. You don't have to say, oh, well, there wouldn't be a buyer. No one would buy him. This is literally like, do you want him to stick around or do you not? Now, the reason for him sticking around, you can factor in things like wages and age and things like that and what he contributes. But this is just, do you, if we could sell him for a fair market price tomorrow, would you? Or would you keep him? So you ready to go through it?
Go.
Yes.
All right, Dave, I will start with you. I'll just pick a name. Again, just keep or sell. Very easy game. Can't get it wrong.
Are we going through the so we're going through it in a
I'm going to give you a name.
Order, starting with keeper, defense, midfield, strikers, right?
It's going to be whatever order I can think of players that are on the team.
Okay, good.
Fair. Leno.
Keep.
Scott.
Keep.
Dave. Look, I'm just going to give you the back line, Dave. Stay with you, so I'm going to give you a couple names, and then I'll switch it over to Scott. Otherwise, this is going to get tedious. It's already tedious, frankly. Mustafi.
Sell.
Koscielny.
Keep.
Socrates.
Keep.
Bellerin.
Keep.
Kolasinac.
Sell.
Nacho.
Keep, but only for one season. I'd give him a 1-year extension.
You broke the rules. All right, Scott, you ready?
Yep.
Koscielny.
Keep. No, sell. I'd sell Koscielny.
You guys are good at this. Mustafi.
Sell.
Kolasinac.
Keep.
Nacho.
Sell.
Socrates.
Keep.
Bellerin.
Keep.
I'd sell Kolasinac, by the way. Okay, let's move to the midline.
I could be sold either way.
Yeah, Scott, you can be sold? How much am I getting for you? Because I'm in that market.
Charging per hour or per evening? Or?
Yeah, I'm in the market for all of it. Scott, I'll stick with you now. We're going to do the midfield. Torreira.
Keep.
Guendouzi.
Keep.
Xhaka.
Sell.
Ramsey. Just kidding. You don't have a choice. Okay, let's move over to... Jesus, that's our whole midfield.
El Neni.
Oh, who? What?
El Neni.
Doesn't ring a bell. Coughlin, is he still around? Dave, you ready?
Yeah.
Torreira.
Keep.
Guendouzi.
Loan. I know that's breaking the rules, but...
Okay. You can't sell him right now. He's 19 years old. Xhaka?
No. Sell.
Yeah. El Neni. That guy.
Sell.
Yeah, please.
Is he still got time left in his deal, I presume? So.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, he's probably going to be here. Like he's on the Carl Jenkinson plan. He'll be here till we're all dead and buried.
It feels like he's at the start of a 3-year deal because that's just what we do.
I'm gonna stick with you, Dave. Iwobi.
Yep. Sell.
Yeah. Mkhitaryan.
Sell.
Ozil.
Sell.
Aubameyang.
Keep.
Lacazette.
Keep.
Welbeck.
Well, he's gone anyway, isn't he? So.
Yeah, there's rumors. Rumors we might sign him.
Sell. He's too injury prone.
Scott. Ozil.
Sell.
Mm-hmm. Good man. Iwobi.
Keep.
What? To do what with? Unless you're converting him to midfield, you can't keep him.
I want to see him move into. I think if Arsenal
Why
goes
isn't
like a
he in
4-3-3.
midfield? Why is it? Oh God, it does my head in. Okay, Mkhitaryan.
Yeah, I'd like to see. Yeah, I'd like to see him in a 4-3-3 or a 4-1-4-1 as one of the attacking eights. I think that probably maximizes his skills.
I'm going to break the rules of the game and just make a quick aside here. The thing that astonishes me is how little we've played with the midfield three this season, and I've seen people say it only works with Ramsey, and maybe that's true. But we concede the midfield in every game. Like, just put Iwobi in there and see what happens. You can play Xhaka, Torreira, and Iwobi and just see. I just love to see it. Mkhitaryan, Scott.
Sell.
Aubameyang.
Sell.
Really?
I mean, I think we need to rebuild. And if somebody's coming in fair market value, I'd sell them.
Lacazette.
Sell. Same deal.
Wow.
It's funny, right? I mean Lacazette is probably the most.
I would love to keep both of them, but if somebody's coming in for a 29-year-old and a 27 or a 28-year-old, and they're giving us full value, this team needs to rebuild. They need the money. Those are the two guys that are giving the most money. I wouldn't sell both of them, but if somebody's coming in for one of them, both of them would be available to me.
Yeah, let's agree with this. You've got a lot of goals to replace because there's none left. So my attitude is I would sell all of them. All of them. They can all fucking go. Honestly, none of them are worth a damn. They can all go.
But yeah,
you know what?
If anybody's coming in,
Hector Bellerin for lifetime captaincy, and the rest of them can fucking go. Honestly, none of them need to stay.
Let's just start selling the seats at the ground.
Yes,
probably melt the plastic down.
Sure. Yeah,
recycling
has no value these days.
Okay, so then let's finish off real quick with predictions about the Valencia game, and I look at it this way. Everybody's like, oh, the Europa League's our chance. Now we can refocus on it. The scary thing is, right, we were on this run of form where we had really found something and clicked, and we were winning games, and we were playing well, and we got through Napoli, and now we go into Valencia at an absolute low ebb. And the thing that scares me, Dave, is if you're Emery, what system do you trust? You tried the back three against Palace, and it was brutal. Now, admittedly, that back five that he picked was disaster. You tried to be aggressive against Wolves, that didn't work. You tried this weird sort of counterattacking 4-4-2 against Leicester, disaster. You went with sort of your preferred setup against Watford and Everton, and both games were pretty bad. If you're Emery going into this game, how do you know what approach to take at this point?
I mean, you don't. I just presume he's got a dartboard with varying formations on it. He blindfolds himself, and he just wherever the dart hits, that's the formation we're going for this week. I personally prefer to see 3 at the back because I feel as small a sample size as it is, I feel a clutch of our better performances this season have come with 3 at the back. But honestly, what's the point in second guessing? Because he's so schizophrenic when it comes to selections. I think my concern is, and this kind of goes beyond tactical, is I think at this stage of the season, when momentum is so against you, which it has been over these last 5 games, take Napoli out of the equation, that I think that's very hard to claw back, especially when, right now I think we're really quite limited with personnel and who we can pick. So I'm not going to second guess him because I think it's like trying to rake leaves on a windy day, trying to second guess Emery. So I have no idea what lineup we'll see tomorrow. I've got no idea what formation he'll go with. I'm not confident we'll get a result. I think we'll lose tomorrow. I think the scoreline will be more respectful than the Rennes scoreline. I think we'll score, and I think we'll just about sneak through. I think I could see something like sneaking through 4-3 over the course of 2 legs, and then I'm absolutely confident we'll lose to Chelsea 2-1 in the final. So, hooray!
Wow. I mean, honestly, I'd take getting through Valencia right now. Scott, what's he got to do? I mean, he's tried every system under the sun, and then at halftime he's tried all the other systems under the moon. None of them are working. There's no Ramsey. I don't know what he does. What does he do? Yeah, help us, help him.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of the things feel like they're so reactive to what happened in the previous match. It's very much trying to fix the problems of the previous match and then not realizing, the circumstances are changing kind of thing. Or at least that's what it's felt like over the last, few matches. It's like we've swerved into new problems trying to fix the old problems. And that's very Arsenal right now. I'm not super confident. Probably, the back 3. But the attack is just so, I don't know what you do. I guess, do you do like the 3-4-1-2 kind of thing? I mean, I guess maybe, I don't know who you put that in that one. I guess you put Ozil in front of Aubameyang and Lacazette.
The front two has not looked good. It has not looked like it's working.
It hasn't. But, I mean, the wide players are so out of form right now. I honestly don't know what you do at this time. I'm not feeling great about it. I think it might be like a 2-2. I actually wouldn't even be surprised if it was like even a 2-1 to Valencia right now. I just don't feel, even with Arsenal being at home, that they're in a great spot. It just the whole injury crisis that's gone through with, Ramsey being out, no fullbacks, wing backs that are kind of in trouble right now. I just don't have a lot of confidence. I expect it'll be the 3-4-1-2. I think that's probably the best that we can do right now, and hope that Leno makes some saves and Arsenal can win. Squeak by with maybe like a 2-1 or.
Ooh, you said Leno can make some saves. Are you ITK or what are you thinking here?
Yeah.
No, I'm just hoping. I guess that was my dream. But you're right. It's probably going to be Czech, and not that Czech hasn't been great, but I just I think Leno's. We talked about him being our player this season, and he's not even going to be in probably our biggest match. Going in right now.
Dave, would you start Leno?
Yeah, but historically, Arsenal got a very bizarre approach to keepers and cup finals. I mean, look back to 2013 in the Hull game, where even though Chesney was firmly established as our number one keeper, Wenger persisted with Fabianski, and this was shit Fabianski, not reformed Fabianski. And I still have flashbacks, and I say flashbacks
to him running out of his area.
I have war flashbacks, the sort of PTSD flashbacks to when he was herring off his line 60 yards and the whole player rounded him. But I would go with Leno, because I'm not much. I think when you're still vying for competitions, especially at the business end of them, I don't think there's any room for a sentimentality. So pick your best players. So yeah, I'd maybe give Petr Cech a token against Brighton for the last 10 minutes. Not that you usually substitute keepers unless they're injured, but
yeah,
no, I would not be playing him in the Europa League again, that's for sure. And again, like Scott was saying, I don't think he's done anything wrong of late. I mean, I can't really remember many big errors. I mean, he wasn't great against Rennes away from home, but I don't think I think he's actually had a better season this year than probably the 2 or 3 prior. So I just think Leno's the better keeper at this point. Play your best side. It's fairly simple.
Yeah, and I mean, Czech's going back to Chelsea at the end of the season. He's going home. I mean, it's a reminder that that's the club of his home, not Arsenal. Like, I'd be fine with it. Is he
actually going back to Chelsea? What is it, a backroom role? Is it, or coaching role? Or
yeah, I think so.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, the interesting thing here is, I had a long conversation with a friend today about top 4. Chelsea have Watford at home and Leicester away. And we have Brighton at home and Burnley away. Do you think Chelsea are going to get 6 points from those 2 games? I mean, the way all of these teams are playing, you wouldn't necessarily...
They'll get minimum 4. I think they'll get minimum 4 points.
So let's say they get 4.
They'll definitely beat Watford. I think if they need a draw at Leicester, they'll get a draw at Leicester.
But so if they get 4 and we get 6... we're
in 3.
Probably finishing top... okay, well, good. I'm glad you solved that. The only reason I bring it up is because I don't think Emery, he's in a tough spot. He still, even now, can't just say, I'm going all out for Europa League. I still think he's got to have one eye on the Premier League, because I think 2 wins probably gets us top 4, as astonishing as that sounds. Scott, I mean, is that insane?
And you know what? I think 4 points is probably realistic for what Chelsea can do, and then it's going to come down to goal difference. And Arsenal really shit the bed, giving up 9 goals over the last 3 matches. And can you imagine that? Leicester's, drawing at the last day of the season, and Arsenal are against, a deep Burnley team who just will not let us score. And we are just huffing and puffing, and we're going to, go out on goal difference or something stupid like that.
By huffing and puffing, I assume you mean we're trailing 3-0 in the 70th minute. By the way, I mean, Burnley. It would be totally on brand for us to have done this podcast, for Dave to have gone mega Emery out,
and we finished 4th
under the Arsenal Vision flag, and then we finish 4th and win the Europa League, and everybody gives us a middle finger.
And then I can backpedal and say it was the anti-jinx.
I do think it tells you a lot about this
deliberate
season.
Strategy.
I do think it tells you a lot about this season, that we are still in the frame to accomplish the minimum, the goals that were set at the beginning of the season, and aren't sure how to feel about the man who's sort of shepherded us there. I think that's kind of interesting. And, there'll be plenty of time to talk about it this summer when we have Champions League football to look forward to, and we're wondering if Emery should be given a new 5-year contract. So that'll be fun. Scott, you didn't give me your prediction for Valencia.
I think I gave 3 predictions.
Was it Dave? No, Dave gave us the whole thing. How the whole thing was going to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I said my original prediction was 2-1 to Valencia.
Yeah, I'm going to say that this is a wild one. I'll say 2-2, and it's on a knife edge going back to Valencia where we should get smoked 5-0. So we'll see. In any event, this has been a terrible circumstance to record a podcast. We might have been better just not putting one out, but we did have to put one out. So, Scott, are we going to do a pregame show tomorrow?
I'm clearing my schedule.
Awesome. So, assuming that technical issues don't strike, we will probably be doing a live YouTube show tomorrow ahead of the game that will be a far sight cheerier than this because Dave won't be here. But I do want to thank Dave for being on and for all the grief and problems you're going to cause me.
Well, at least probably someone's just. Well, many mad people on Twitter probably taking contracts out against my life. So there's that.
I will tell you this.
I've achieved something today.
I'm going to give you the YouTube login for the Arsenal Vision account. You can specifically respond to the YouTube comments because those are going to be aggressive.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun day for you. In any event, Dave is sort of on Twitter at McMeeks, and when I say thank you, Dave,
Elliot, stop giving that information.
I mean it only in the loosest sense, but thank you, Dave.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I now regret meeting you IRL. Scott is on Twitter at @O_that_crab. Thanks, Scott.
Yeehaw.
My name is Elliot Smith. I would say give us a 5-star review, but there isn't a shot in hell you're going to do it after this one. I think this is going to be a close one with the first Emery podcast we did after he was announced as manager and people basically rioted on our website. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. In any event, though, look, we're all in this together. We all support Arsenal through thick and thin. I think Arsblog said it best on his podcast where he said he appreciates the respectful disagreement that he got for his contributions on the last podcast, and we certainly appreciate what will certainly be respectful feedback to this podcast. So we look forward to continuing the conversation, which will be tomorrow before the game, so join us for that. As always, we love you. We really appreciate you listening through thick and thin, and by thin, I mean this podcast, and through thick, I mean when Tim and Clive and Paul are back. So look forward to that on a coming podcast. My travel's over, so we're back to regular scheduled stuff after this, and everyone who you look forward to hearing from will be back. In any event, we do love you. We will have another podcast coming up shortly. We'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Valencia 0.